If the mikveh was mashka and I was a duck, I swim to the bottom and I never come up. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get my tree out now? Or must I hesitate? The mikveh not mashka and I'm not a duck. When I swam to the bottom I was swimming up. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get my tree out now? Or must I hesitate? Neighbors, I ain't lying. The people down here that are sick and dying. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get my tree out now? Or must I hesitate? Come on, children. We're gonna have some fun. You ain't seen nothing like I really want. Tell me how long do I have to wait? Can I get my tree out now? Or must I hesitate? Da 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 da. Thank you. We said, I think last time, that the Rebbe Rashab explained the difference between human intellect and godly intellect. And what he said was that human intellect starts with intellect and finally reaches emunah, finally reaches faith. And godly intellect starts with emunah and is able to internalize that emunah through intellect. The previous Rebbe tells a parable of a king who had an only daughter that he loved very much, and his daughter got married. And they had to move away, the son-in-law and the daughter had to move away, and the king said, I have only one request. Build me wherever you live a little room where I can come and stay. Tonight, we're going to start with emunah, and the emunah we're going to start with is the Torah is true and is unified with Hashem in an absolute and a wondrous unity. Like it says in this book, The Essence of Chassidus, it explains the greatness of the Torah, saying that the Torah is the absolute perfection of how people get along with each other in political and civil systems. It's the absolute perfection of how a person should act as far as his emotion attributes. And it's like we see in Pirkei Avos, it's an absolute perfection of human intellect. Like it says, the Torah is your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the nations. But all this is not the greatness of the Torah. The Torah has something greater than that. The fact that it gives life to everything in the world, the life of everything in the world comes through the Torah. Like Hashem says, let there be light, let there be a heaven. And through Hashem's words, which are communicated through the Torah, that is, through those letters, that's how the life comes into the world. Light actually is enlivened through the letters of Hashem's speech. But that's not the real greatness of the Torah. The real greatness of the Torah, it's completely unified with Hashem, the Infinite One, in an absolute and wondrous unity. So that's our simple connection to Hashem through the Torah. And that comes through Emunah. And that parable story that the previous Rebbe told about the king, what Hashem is saying, that the husband is the Jewish people and the daughter is the Torah. And Hashem is saying, when you learn Torah, Jewish people, when you connect with the Torah, have one little room for me where I can dwell. Keep in mind that the Torah, me and the Torah are completely unified, and when you're learning, I am in there. I want to mention the recipe now, but I think before the recipe we'll tell a story. I titled the story as, "Is There a Letter for Me, Mr. Postman?" This is a story the Rebbe told at the Farbrengen. Once, the yeshiva in Lubavitch was very low on money. And at the same time, Reb Michael, the senior Chassidus advisor in yeshiva, was too old to teach. So they decided to stop paying him his salary in order to save money. And when they told the Rebbe Rashab what they were doing, he said, no, continue to have him on the staff and continue to pay him. Because with his aged appearance and his humble way that he acts, he will be a living example for the students. Once in a Yiddish Farbrengen, the Rebbe told the story that Reb Michael used to repeat. He said once there was a simple villager who got a letter from a faraway place. And the villager was illiterate, he couldn't read. And he went to the local teacher and asked the teacher, the Malamud, to read him the letter. The Malamud read him the letter, and in the middle of the reading the letter, there was the news that a close relative of his had died. And the villager fainted when he heard that his relative passed away. The Rebbe said, there's a question here. The Malamud was reading the letter, why didn't he faint? Why did the villager faint? He said, and the answer is obvious. The villager was Nagaya B'Davar, it was his relative. So therefore it affected him. The Malamud was only reading the letter. The metaphor in the story is that a chassidic teaching from a Rebbe, a mimer or a Sheichet from a Rebbe, is not just a random lesson about the heavenly realms. It's a personal letter to the one reading it from Hashem, his Father in heaven. Every time we learn a mimer, we learn a Sheichet, we learn some word from the Rebbe, we should know and appreciate that this is a direct letter from our Father the King, who's telling us about how he works and how he runs the kingdom. One should not, chas v'sholem, look at it as if it concerns someone else. For example, the Torah promises, if you go in my ways, Rashi says it means if you go in my ways, it means that you should exert yourself in learning Torah. I will give you all your physical needs. That was one of the things we started out way back. Somebody had asked, how is it that we can approach Hashem and get what we need? And here Rashi gives the answer. When we exert ourselves in Torah, Hashem will give us all of our physical needs. The person who's reading that, he might think that he's talking to somebody else, to the sages of the Talmud, or to Rashi himself, who taught us a teaching. In other words, our friend doesn't feel that the words of the Torah are directed to him, but the words of the Torah are directed to each one of us personally. Or he'll read that the Midrash says, when you see a Jew who's naked of mitzvahs, help him to clothe himself, help him to do a mitzvah. As a result, he goes around and tells everybody, help a Jew to do a mitzvah, help a Jew to do a mitzvah. But it's like he's reading the letter to somebody else, like it doesn't really affect him. He doesn't faint. Why should he? It's not his problem. He's doing the mitzvah. It doesn't touch him personally. The same applies when he tells somebody else about the letter that the Baal Shem Tov wrote, in which he said that Mashiach told him, when the waters of Chassidus are spread out, that's when Mashiach is coming. The guy doesn't get that the message is to him, that he's the one that has to be involved in spreading out those waters in order for Mashiach to come. Even when the letter says, this means you, like this story from the Rebbe, and telling you that this means you when you read something in the Torah, especially a teaching from a Rebbe. It's your father who's sending you the letter. And the guy still doesn't get it. It's just a letter he's reading to someone else. He missed the point completely. Whoever learns and hears a mimer should take the teaching like it's directed to him personally. And even though it's beyond belief that the mimer can be a personal letter to each one individually, then employ the power of holy folly of Shtetl Kedusha and go higher than intellect and accept the fact, because the Rebbe is telling you it, that the mimer and the sicha is to each one of us personally. Now we'll have the recipe. The recipe for this week is healthy noodle soup that can be put away on the shelf and it'll last forever. It's very simple, but the complication is you need a dehydrator, a food dehydrator. Will cost you about 30 or 40 bucks, something like that. And the way you do it is, the way I do it, I take a pound of whole wheat noodles, a pound of whole rice noodles, and I cook them up together. That way, when you say a bracha on it, it's a brei menei mazonos. And then I put it in the dehydrator, and they come out dry and preserved, and I put them in with some organic frozen peas. And that's the recipe. When you eat it, you put in some soy sauce or any kind of spices that you want, some sprouts, and it's a healthy, delicious, and a fast meal. That's the recipe for tonight. Now we'll have a musical interlude. Mendel, you ready?
I'm ready. Conflict she could feel, even as she birthed the twins. Jacob grasped base of heel. Esau bristled fiery red, wood hung with dawn's first light. But Yaakov with his mind was led, he lured late into the night. Though the hands were the hands of Esau, yet the voice Isaac heard was Jacob's voice. He saw the ruse of mother and son, that God had made the choice. At first it seemed rather cruel to treat brother Esau so. gets on. Though the hands were the hands of Esau, yet the voice Isaac heard was Jacob's voice. He saw the rules of mother and son, that God had made his choice. So he told Jacob to deceive his father and inspire the blessings that he would receive, the heritage entire. From fulfilling the command of his inspired mother, he would earn the hatred of Esau, his true brother. Though the hands were the hands of Esau, yeah, yet the voice Isaac heard was Jacob's voice. Yeah, he saw the rules of mother and son, that God had made the choice. Back soon for another Yiddish one a little later on. Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, now that we had, by the way, I just want to add about the recipe. I didn't mention that when you eat this, you have to reconstitute it. You don't eat it dry. Put it in some boiling water and leave it for about 10 minutes and then reconstitute. And how we'll connect that to the Torah and to godliness is that now when we're doing Torah and mitzvahs, we're doing it in a very dry way. But it's being preserved. And when Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to add the water, which is his nachas, which is his tainug that he has from our Torah and mitzvahs. And we're going to get that delicious Torah and mitzvahs stew. Now, I want to move from simple faith now to more sophisticated. And the way you get more sophisticated is that when you internalize the faith through intellect. And the way that we are able to know Hashem and connect to Hashem is through the Seder Stalshalos, through the chain of the descent of the world. And that will be our bridge to Hashem. Like it says in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says, to know the Seder Stalshalos is a very high and exalted mitzvah in order to know the true existence of Hashem. And we said, and we said a few times that we should memorize that there are 4 worlds, memorize what they are, and that there's 10 attributes, 10 spheros in the realm of godliness. And we explained what Chabad is. Chochmah is the godly idea itself, higher than words and letters. And Bina, understanding, is how that idea is dressed into words and letters to be able to be explained. And the way it's dressed into words and letters to be able to explain is by measuring out the details of the idea. Das is not Chochmah and it's not Bina. It's the concentration of the mind on whichever one of those you're concentrating on to connect them. Now, to explain those 3 in a more sophisticated way is that each one of them has 3 dimensions. And those 3 dimensions are Keser, Chochmah, and Bina, which is depth, width, and length. So the Chochmah will have a depth of Chachma, a width of Chachma, and a length of Chachma. And Bina will have a depth, width, and length. And Das will have a depth, width, and length. And I'm going to explain first depth in general, and then the depth of Chachma, and then I'll explain width and length concerning Bina. Reb Hillel Parch explains that depth can be understood as a thing that does not exist at all. And what does it mean it doesn't exist? He gives an example. You have two walls, and one wall is running east, and the other wall is running south. And any way that you measure is either south or east. And there is a place where the two walls come together, and they touch, and that point is the depth. It's an immeasurable point. Any way that you measure is either east or south. And that will be the depth. And the depth of Chachma will be the nothing. And that depth is called the nothing because it's an immeasurable point. And we mentioned that Chassidus, which is the Yechida of Torah, is an abstract point, which also can't be measured. But it has an ability to bring light and vitality into all the other parts of the Torah. And the depth of Chachma will be the nothing, and there's two nothings. There's one nothing of the teacher, where the teacher takes away from his own great intellect in order to connect with the student. And there's a nothing of the student where he gives away from what he was involved in up till now to open up his mind to be able to receive from the teacher. And these are the two depths of Chachma. And the way it works in the mind, when the person opens his mind to be able to receive the Chachma from the Rebbe, that will be the nothing of the student, and that will be the point. It's not a Chachma, it's not a wisdom itself, but that will be the point that connects him to the wisdom. And through connecting to the wisdom will now be revealed in his mind as a flash. Like in the cartoons where the guy goes eureka and the light bulb goes on above his head. The way depth and width works is, I'm sorry, not depth and width, but length and width. The length will be the metaphors that explain the idea. For example, when we learn how Hashem creates the world from nothing, we give known metaphors for how that works. And the known metaphors are a sun and a ray, a soul enlivening a body, and the power of an actor in an act. And from those metaphors, the godly idea of how the world is created from nothing will be brought closer to the mind. The sun and the ray, you have this big thing, this godly entity, this unlimited, infinite one. And he brings in a ray, and that ray is able to reveal something in the world. The width of the explanation will be to know which point each one of those metaphors illustrate that the other one doesn't. The sun illustrates the fact that even though, just like the sun can light up 1,000,000 houses, cook an egg on a sidewalk, give somebody a suntan and grow a tree all at once, and the sun never changes. So too in Hashem's creation of the world, he does everything all at once, but he does it through a ray, and therefore we see there's no change in Hashem. But the lacking in that metaphor is that a ray of the sun only lights things up. It doesn't enliven them, so we need a second metaphor, which is a soul enlivening a body. But a soul that enlivens a body does not cover everything. It won't cover the fact that the soul enlivening a body changes. It's affected by what happens to the body. So that's why you need the sun metaphor. And you need the metaphor of the power of the actor in the act, because just like all the planets and the spheres and the constellations spin in the heavens, and it looks like nobody is doing it, and really is Hashem is doing all that action, but it has to be hidden that Hashem is doing it. That means the power of the actor in the act. All you see is the act, like somebody throws a stone. The stone appears separate from the hand, but its whole arc and its speed and where it's going to land is according to the person who threw it. So you need all three metaphors. So that's a little bit of the depth, particularly the depth of Chachma, and a little bit of the length and the width, which is described through the Bina. Now if we can have a musical interlude. Thank you, Markel.
Okay, that was it. Okay.
I don't have the clock, no.
I'll give it to you in a second.
All right, we got another one from the great Jewish poet, songwriter, and novelist Mordechai Gebirtig. This one is called Avreml the Pickpocket. And if you wait a couple of days, I'll try to have it uploaded on the website, www.TheWellsprings.org. I'll try to put the translation of it. It's actually a very cute song. On Heim bin ich jung geblieben, so die Freud mich heraus getrieben, wenn ich noch in 13 Jahren gehabt. Oh, in der Fremde, weit von Mann Säugen, hat die Schmutze sich mit das Zeugen geworden ist von mir Avreml. Ich bin Avreml der Marvicher, Agresse Hitler, ich habe leicht und sicher, das beste Mal, das Gedenken bis in heute. Herein ist Wiese, alle lachen in Avreml, Markel, wie eine Prosperiaten. Zum Narbakarge, schmutzige Magnaten. Hey, mit der Chaie, mit der Tapas-Tamas-Nacht. Ich bin Avreml, in die Fremde nicht gehabt zum Leben. Gebeten Bräut an Orem, vielleicht noch geben. Nor jener Leid, wo seinen Tomit satt. I verlege noch, treiben mich mit Zorn. Sie wächst da gar nicht, sie ist mir Kuhim geworden. Gar nicht bin ich, nur Healthfood. Ich bin Avreml der Marvicher. Heidrich sind Künstler, ich arbeite leicht und sicher. Hey, ja, das ist Leute, herein in Kutschement. Herein der Musik, das selbst in der Salat. Oh, ich Markel, die Ende Prosperiaten. So bin ich Barkarge, schmutzige Magnaten. Doch die Menschen, Hamildin, Tanashmurat. Ich bin Avreml, Korabelariat. Ich kerrang von Kille, Gicht von Twisten Meuren. Oi, in a rain, Bakoshe, Volta, Soy, Normanto, Yetina, Gatribin, Zolof, mein Max, Heimisch, geschrieben, mit Oisi, ja, Eisgereise, und von Gold. Ich bin Avreml der Marvicher, am Mensch der Größe, ich bin Welt von ihm sicher, am Mensch der Feiner mit Herz mit der Gefühl, am Mensch der Reiner, du was Gott allein will, oi, wenn es mir so, gehabt am Mann Zeugen, wer soll die Finstere, chassidic Zeugen, wer noch auf ihn, wer an Tag in der Welt gehabt, so liegt Avreml, der All right, that was good music. Back to you, Bitzalel. Good. It's not.
Chassidus tells us, like we said, the Torah and Hashem are unified in an absolute and a wondrous unity. And that's how we know that there is that unification, is because Chassidus tells it to us. There's a Sheichet from the previous Rebbe that illustrates how when two metaphors are brought in an explanation of Chassidus, each one contains a point that illustrates something that the other one doesn't. And the Frierdiker Rebbe tells two metaphors for Chassidus, and one of them is mining coal, and the other one is diving for pearls. In both of them, you have to have an airline to stay safe and alive. And the airline is the Rebbe, and the difference between the two metaphors is that mining for coal, the Chassidus, is in order to keep us warm during the dark, cold gullus. And diving for pearls, which pearls are not a necessity, but they're a beautiful and a valuable thing, indicates the learning of Chassidus not in the way that's necessary to keep us warm, but in a way of learning a lot of Chassidus which is the service which brings Mashiach. We have two different kinds of learning Chassidus. One is to keep warm in the cold days of the Gullus, and the other one is to learn a whole bunch of Chassidus, because that is the avoda, that is the service that's going to bring Mashiach. Now I'm going to have the sign-off, our famous sign-off song. Where's Isaac? Is Isaac here? I don't see Isaac.
He's under the table. We teach him.
Okay.
Gesundheit, my friend.
Gang is in
Gesundheit.